raw, uncut, and unapologetic. Welcome to Men Talking Mindfulness with your hosts John McCaskill and Will Schneider. Here we focus on helping men and those with men in their lives solve some of life's complex challenges through understanding the practices of mindfulness and how they can help. Each episode is in an environment free of judgment and criticism, with a focus on authenticity and inner peace. Let's dig in.
Welcome to a brand new episode of Men Talking Mindfulness, the podcast, where we dive into important conversations around male well-being in today's complex world. I'm John McCaskill, one of your hosts, and I'm joined by my brother from another mother, my co-host in New York City, Will Schneider. And today we're sitting down with Colin Bye. Colin Bye is from Washington, D.C., and he is the visionary founder of Manscending, a movement dedicated to helping young men form meaningful connections in a world that often leaves them feeling misunderstood and isolated. We're going to delve into the alarming statistics that 2/3 of young men in the U.S. aged 18 to 23 feel that no one really knows them well. Colin's journey towards fostering meaningful relationships is a story of personal growth and transformation. His struggles during his youth and the sense of belonging he found in a college fraternity led him to the realization of the essential role community plays in one's life. And we've talked about that on the show before, but we're going to be talking about it more here with Colin. But it's not just for well-being, but for success too. We'll hear how these experiences shaped his mission with Manscending and his personal dedication to mastering the art of meaningful connections. We will also be unpacking the role of mindfulness, a core aspect of Manscending's mission, which of course is also a core aspect of our mission here with Men Talking Mindfulness, in creating a judgment-free space for men to express their truths. Colin's vision is not just about fostering personal growth, but about equipping men to powerfully and sustainably contribute to society despite the unique challenges they faced in these modern times. Get ready for an enlightening and inspiring conversation as we delve into the world of Manscending, explore the practices of mindfulness and meditation, and learn about but we are also going to be learning about the
quest from the guest.
to form a worldwide brotherhood of calm, competent, and compassionate men. Whether you're a man navigating this complex world or someone invested in male well-being, which should be everyone, this episode promises to offer a wealth of insights. So sit back, tune in, and let's start talking mindfulness. But before we do that, I got to turn it over to Will, my brother from another mother, for some announcements.
Awesome. Good to have you here, Colin. So we're going to have our merch store up very soon. Excited to get some merch on more people's bodies out there. So be on the lookout for that announcement coming soon. Hey, also, we're going to start doing episodes where we answer your questions in the form of voice memo that will be played right here live on the show. If you'd like to send us a voice memo to be played and answered on the show, simply text MTM to 33777. Once again, that's 33777. And you'll get the link to record a voice memo. If you don't want to text, just visit, sayhi.chat/MTM. Again, that's sayhi.chat/MTM. Same thing. You simply record your memo here. Super excited to have you guys' voices on the show. So mind your manners when you're leaving us a message. Remember, it's raw, uncut, and unapologetic. So you're going to put yourself out there. And lastly, hey, subscribe to our IG at mentalkingmindfulness.com. That's on Instagram. And also we're over at Men Talking Mindfulness on YouTube. And make sure on YouTube you hit the little bell to for notification for new content that we're constantly putting out there. And thank you, Colin, for boxing that out. We actually hired an editor to help us cut the show. Right, we're doing snippets. Like there's Colin over there miming for us. So hey, check us out on youtube.com/@mentalkingmindfulness. And John, I'm gonna get us in my ears. So why don't you do the 5 grounding practice?
Yeah.
And then we're gonna jump in and we're gonna talk to our guests. So
we're gonna do
good
that.
to have everyone here.
So, as I was saying before we hit go live, this grounding practice that we start the show with and we end the show with is just as much for myself and Will as it is for our guests and our audience. So let's ground ourselves before we get into these questions with Colin that we're so excited to ask you. So go ahead and get comfortable, again, whatever that looks like and feels like for you. Comfortable and safe physically and psychologically. And let's just bring our attention to our breaths. Noticing the rise and fall of our chest and our belly as we inhale and exhale. Nice deep breath in, filling all the way up from the bottom to the top. Hold and release. Holding empty at the bottom. Deep breath in. Hold and release. Noticing the sensations as you exhale. Holding empty at the bottom. Noticing that emptiness, that feeling, that desire to breathe in and breathe in. Filling all the way up. Hold at the top and release. Feeling that emptiness at the bottom again and holding just for a second, and last deep breath in. All the way up. And an extra sip at the top. Hold and release. And as you release, go ahead and start to bring some movement back into your body, your neck, your shoulders, your fingers, your toes. Those micro movements that we've talked about on the show before. And let's go ahead and jump right in. So, Colin, I love your enthusiasm, brother. I love it, man. So, I was checking out your website before we jumped on here, and I just want to start with some of the questions that are on your website right there, right? So, what is Manscending? One, why is it needed, and how does Manscending help? Let's talk about that to start.
Yeah, let's just jump right in. I'm so game. So first of all, thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure,
looking
man.
forward to this for a long time. Let's do it. So Manscending is a company I started with the support of my partner at the time, who is now my wife.
Nice.
But it is essentially my effort and desire to bring about a new era of brotherhood. Long story short, and maybe we don't have to make it so short, but really it started when Tiger and I were sipping coffee in New York City, where I was living at the time. And this was at a time when the Me Too movement was really taken off, and a lot of questioning of what does it mean to be a man today? And this is something that I've been thinking about for a really long time. To be totally honest, I hit puberty really late. And so when I was in high school, all the guys around me were getting taller, their voices were dropping, other changes were happening. I was kind of a little behind. And so even back then I was like, well, what does it mean to be a man, to feel like a man? Is it just these physical changes, or is it something else? And then I got into college, which was an entirely new ball game. And I joined a fraternity while I was there. And I joined a fraternity because a lot of the guys that I loved hanging out with were in a fraternity. And also it comes with a lot of benefits in terms of having a community of support, having a place where you kind of belong, where you can consistently go and hang out and feel like you're welcome there. And also other opportunities to connect with other groups on campus. A lot of fraternities, almost all of them, have a big service component. So there is a sense of giving back to the community. And overall, every chapter and every fraternity is going to be different. Even within the same fraternity, every chapter is different in different schools. But it was a very positive experience. However, there are, of course, challenges that show up. And a lot of them are in the news and are usually the stuff that is most reported. A lot of incidents around hazing, alcohol abuse, even sexual violence, and creating spaces where that's possible on campus. And so I knew that when I was joining a fraternity, this is a mixed bag. But I also knew that I felt very welcomed by the guys around me. I knew that we have values that are at the core of our fraternity that are really noble, I thought, and virtuous. And so I wanted to see what that experience is like. And so some of my best friends today are from my fraternity experience. And going back to that coffee shop in New York City, I remember sitting with Tiger while all of this stuff was going on. And I felt a sense of shame around being a man in this environment, and also a couple of questions around, I think it's great that there is a level of accountability finally being brought to the behavior of individuals, but I also didn't see any opportunity for redemption or any path for growth or change. And, this is part of the society we live in today, where people are very reactive. And there is a sense of, polarization is on the rise. And I kept thinking back to my fraternity experience, being like, I wish I was still connected with the guys and more of them than I am now. And B, it was kind of a missed opportunity for me, because you have these spaces all over the country where young guys are getting together. There's these values at the heart of the fraternity that are very positive. My own fraternity is excellence, morality, service, friendship, knowledge. These are amazing, beautiful things to integrate into a young man's life. And yet, there is a feeling of disconnection and isolation that is happening with young men and men in general all over the country. And so it's this difference this gap really of having these opportunities, these spaces for real connection, but that not being necessarily the outcome. And so I went on a journey after graduating to really figure out, what does it mean to have a community, to be part of a community? What does it mean to belong, especially as a man in a society where we are renegotiating the contract that has been in place for hundreds and hundreds of years, at least here in the West. So these are all different thoughts that came to me. And funny enough, Manscending initially started as a clothing company.
No way.
Because we were in a CVS checking out, and I think Tiger saw a People magazine with Oprah on the front with a big pink long shirt on that said "Share," and she was like, "Why don't we make clothing that has messages on it that kind of push back against a lot of the more restrictive ideas of what it means to be a man today?" And I was like, great, let's jump into that. And it did not take very long for either of us to realize we have very little experience in fashion design and clothing creation. And also, thinking from a more strategic perspective, maybe that's not the most effective way to get guys to think differently, not just about the world, but about themselves and about each other. And so one thing led to the next. And I was living in New York City, which, if you have not been there, I know you live there. There's a lot going on all the time, and it's very easy to just go. That's the pace of things. And so I got sucked right into that. My background's in acting, so that's where all the miming came from.
There you go.
Will's background, he's got a little background in that too.
Yeah, so if you notice any theatrics, that's probably why. Hopefully nothing, show ending, but so I was auditioning, I was working, actually waiting tables at the time at a couple of different restaurants. And when I moved to New York, the first thing I did was I called up an acting studio that I had done work with before. And I said, listen, I want to be involved in some kind of service opportunity. I want to be of service. I want to give the skills that I have. And I didn't really know what was coming for me, but I had a very short, very intense conversation with the head of outreach, an amazing woman named Susie. And she basically interviewed me, and the next month I was assigned to bring acting classes and improv classes to communities on Rikers Island. So in a
Oh, wow.
detention center, yeah, in a jail. And as part of that, also with the outreach program, I was bringing improv classes, basic communication exercises to folks in rehabilitation centers, in schools that were underfunded and underserved. And it was very eye-opening, especially in the sense where I was working with people whom society had largely, at least psychologically, kind of discarded, in the sense of putting them on the outside, and making it difficult to reintegrate, to come back in, to rebuild connections and real relationships. And so I was doing all these different programs, but something else that totally changed my life in this time and kind of laid the foundation for the work that I do with Manscending is we invited anybody who did any of the programs from our outreach. So people who were in jail, people who were recovering from addiction, even just acting students from the studio. And we said, listen, every Sunday we have a 4-hour class production studio. Basically, it's its own acting studio. You come in, we do some exercises, you create some scenes, you write some scripts, we cobble them together and figure out how to create like a overall arc or narrative around it all, and then we perform it. And we go to facilities around the 5 boroughs of New York, including in detention centers, and we create opportunities to literally share our stories and uplift voices of people who have not had that experience and have been told repeatedly that your voice doesn't matter. And so every Sunday I was going to the Stella Adler studio on 27th Street and was working with a group of people who could not have been more diverse and different. I mean, from all walks of life, including myself. And I got to witness really like magic, because over the course of those 4 hours, we took a group of people who had very little in common. And by the end of it, we were a unit. We were an ensemble, a group of people working towards a common goal. And, you know, part of that approach was creating a space where people could take risks without being judged for them, where people could make choices, bold choices, and have those be celebrated. And so I did this for a couple of years. And in addition to the acting work I was doing, to the work that was actually paying my bills, it built up, and I was giving, and I was not giving enough to myself, and I had a brutal crash. I won't go into too much details, but it was, pretty ugly. And, I was feeling so overwhelmed and helpless, which is not a fun experience, not a very pleasant thing to happen. And I realized that, if I actually want to make a difference, I need to start with myself. I need to learn how to contribute sustainably. And I did not know how to do that. So with the support of Tiger, my partner, we basically decided to make a huge shift and to focus entirely on learning and mastering the art of self-empowerment. Some people might call it self-care, but to me, it is more than that, because it's an investment in not just my own energy and ability, but in my ability to support and empower others around me. And so launched into a yoga teacher training, became certified, and started to put together some of the amazing lessons that we were learning in this yoga teacher training at Kripalu, which is in Western Mass. This amazing center. You get so many different teachers coming in. And I remember sitting in this room with 20 mostly older white women who were also taking the course with us. and we were very close as a cohort. And I just kept hearing the same thing over and over again, which was, I wish I learned this earlier. And this is in response to simple breathing techniques, mindfulness techniques, how to move and care for the body in a way that avoids injury and increases strength and flexibility. And I was, 23, 24, sitting there, and I was like, shit, I wish I learned this earlier. And so that was like the spark, where it was like, okay, if I want to support other young guys, and honestly support myself to show up powerfully, these are the techniques that we need to be learning. Like, these are the kinds of communities that we need to stay consistent, because that's another thing I'm sure you guys know with meditation and mindfulness and really any practice. It is a practice.
Right.
It's not like a surgery where it's like, okay, I'm going to go do a 2-week silent meditation retreat and not speak to anybody, and I'm done. I'm good.
Everything's fixed.
I'm mindful now. Like, it's okay. That was fun. Now back to just everything the way it was. And that, that's not how it works. And so, all that to say, Manscending is an opportunity and to empower groups of men and individual men with the tools to regulate themselves, to center themselves, to empower themselves with more energy, more focus, so that they can be of greater service to others. And specifically, I'm working with fraternities, because of what I mentioned already. Like, I had a very positive experience in fraternities. I know they get a bad rep for, single, isolated, and very tragic incidents. And that's actually what motivated me to really dive into fraternities, is because the idea for me of having a brotherhood, a group of guys who have your back, are there to support you, to guide you, to challenge you productively, and to enter a space like that, and through just a lack of thinking and a lack of awareness, have something like alcohol poisoning happening, or some form of other abuse that leads to a kid ending up in the hospital, or even dying. That to me is a deep violation of what we need and what men need. And there's a whole history behind where these practices come, like where hazing kind of originates, or where it was reinforced, and how we're managing it as a community of national fraternities and partners. So that's maybe a separate question, but like, that's what makes me angry, and that's what drives my fire, to make sure that in every single fraternity chapter in the United States and internationally, you have a brother or two who are trained and prepared to support their brothers. And we're looking at a huge lack of mental health professionals, in particular male mental health professionals, in particular male mental health professionals of color. Like, it's very, very difficult to find older guys who can serve as role models and stewards of these spaces for boys, right? And so my solution to this is, okay, I can't train counselors and therapists across the countries, or make anybody do anything. But what I can do is empower the guys who are already in those spaces to show up for their brothers with compassion, and also to challenge them to grow. This is something that I say to a lot of the guys I work with. The difference between a friend and a brother, in my eyes, is that a friend helps you feel better. A brother helps you become better.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
And that's part of the agreement. So yeah, that's what I do. I can go into like how I do it, but I know I just kind of
Yeah.
monologued for a
Well,
little bit. So I'll take a
no,
pause and
no, I
a
would
sip
love
of
to
water.
talk to you a little bit about, thank you for saying that. And I was going to ask you about, what does it mean? What does it mean to be brothers, or what does brotherhood mean? So thanks for clearing that up, or not even clearing it up. Just really, I love how you stated that. Becoming better is brotherhood, helping. So why don't we go into the curriculum a little bit as far of Manscending, because I'm really interested in how you're teaching these your students. And let's go from the inside. So what are they doing? What are you teaching them, like individually? Like what individual practices are you teaching them, as well as I love the connection piece you talked about, because that's where you really begin to grow is in the company of other people, especially if you're in other company of other men. You could really grow depending on the type of community and the criteria in which you create that community, or the container we talked about earlier. So why don't you dive into the individual practices, and please, like, how do you connect them as a community, and what you've seen the results be?
Yeah. So one thing that I see a lot of, especially in an age where we just have so much information and resources and toolkits and articles and a nonstop feed of people telling you how to live your life, uh, that's exhausting to navigate.
Right.
And so when I am working on curriculum development, or when I'm delivering about, these practices, because it's just not effective to give somebody a bunch of writing or to give somebody a presentation and say, look, this thing will change your life. You just got to do it. Instead, I provide an experience of self-regulation.
Awesome.
And one of the greatest tools all of us have to change our state, not just mentally, but physiologically, change the chemistry of our body so that we can show up better, is our breath. So I really appreciated doing some breathing during our grounding today. And so essentially, like I said, we're in a lot of the guys I work with are in an environment that's just so full of stuff and information that my approach is basically say, this is going to sound weird. It's going to feel a little weird. Just do it and see how you feel. And I take them through a couple of different breathing patterns. Some of them are upregulating. So short, sharp inhalations, exhalations to really get the blood pumping, to move our nervous system into the fight or flight, into, a sense of stress, to have the adrenals releasing, adrenaline and cortisol, and to amp these guys up. And, we take a moment and we say, okay, how are we feeling? Any shifts and changes? Anybody feel different? And then we say, okay, let's turn it the other way. And then I guide breathing exercises to just go the opposite direction as effectively as possible. A lot of that is based on the work of Patrick McEwen and the Oxygen Advantage, which is just incredible and has blown my mind in terms of what's possible with the breath. It involves breath holds on the exhale, so like you were doing, and slow, smooth, easy breathing, essentially slowing the breath down, relaxing intentionally the body, and bringing our attention back to anything in the present moment. And that can be the body, that can be the sounds we're hearing, that can be looking at something, that can be the movement of the breath, or even feeling the heartbeat. And so basically I teach something I call a centering practice, which, I take these guys on a journey with the breath for them to see what's possible. And then I say, so here's the practice. And, this isn't the practice. This is a practice. And it provides the foundation for any number of other activities or practices that they can do to support their own energy levels. So that's like my bread and butter training, is teaching guys teaching them their own power to change how they feel, and giving them a very clear, simple exercise that they can do every morning, or as often as they remember, to center themselves. And I'd be happy to share the practice at the end if you have
you
time
will.
for it.
Yeah, that'd be great. I
Sure.
appreciate that.
So that is like the resilience aspect of this. This is just, like I said, the bread and butter technique. Because when I went on this whole, it felt like a build your own grad program. I was reading books and taking courses and practicing different coaching techniques. All, with the question of how do I navigate a really complicated world, very unpleasant and difficult sensations, situations, relationships. How do I make my way through that as easily as possible?
Yeah.
And that I very quickly realized, before I can do anything else, before I can set the goals and organize my calendar and make the to-do list and put in the journaling practices and the gratitude and all of these different things that are kind of I look at them as like tools that we can put in a toolbox. I needed awareness. I needed to notice that something wasn't working, and not just notice it, but also in some ways embrace it. And that's really hard, because often when we notice something that isn't working, we either try to fix it immediately or we ignore it, and say, oh, well, it'll sort itself out. It's fine. And that to me just wasn't working. And I experienced that firsthand in New York, where I was, just giving my energy away. And I was like, God, I'm tired all the time. I don't know how to use the time I have. Like, I feel kind of disorganized. I'm not very focused in that sense. And I tried a lot of different stuff, different books on how to get your shit together and, figure out life and, make good choices. But it wasn't until I started really practicing mindfulness that I created a different kind of relationship to all of the hard shit in my life. And it immediately created a sense of space. And it's this space, this feeling of, okay, I have a lot going on. I feel super scattered. I feel kind of anxious. I have a million things on my mind. Can I just step back and accept that this happens to be true for me right now? And ironically, the moment that I can acknowledge, like, this is just how I am in this moment, I can start to work with all of that stuff. And so this is why I teach the centering practice as, it's just a 1 hour training, giving an experience for guys to understand the power of these practices, and then also to set them up with it as a practice, rather than, I did this workshop and now I'm done.
Right.
We can talk about this too. Like, the language is so important that we use, especially when working with people who might not be as familiar or kind of already predisposed against certain ideas.
Sure.
And so I kind of describe it as like, listen, guys, in this hour, I'm going to write you a check for $100. And I'm going to give it to each of you. But unless you cash it in every day, it's not going to be worth anything. Like, you need to take it and go and do something with it. The check itself is just a little piece of paper with some information on it. You need to actually cash it in. And that's the practice.
That's a great analogy.
That's like one of the pieces, this self-regulation, this foundation. Because, the other thing that I do is a workshop, which is more involved. And this is where, in my opinion, like, the real magic happens, which is how do we create authentic connections and a space where guys can come together and just be real with each other.
Yeah, it's important.
And it's really hard to do that. if you aren't able to calm yourself down,
Yeah, you got to first
to
relax.
feel fear, and to be okay with feeling fear. Yeah, so that's the center practice.
Yeah, I love that, man. And I think, in addition to feeling grounded, one of the things that you have to do prior to feeling grounded is being vulnerable. And so many of the times when men get together, we walk in there with this fake mask on, or maybe a set of armor on, and we present this false bravado. And it's hard for us to get grounded if we don't set that armor or that shield or that mask down first. So put that down, leave your ego, your sense of pride and all that stuff at the door. You know how they say at the gym, right? Leave your ego at the door. So many people get injured in the gym by not leaving their ego at the door. Well, the same thing. So many people don't get enough out of time spent with a brotherhood because they've got their ego with them. And if they can check that ego, then they can get better grounded. One of the things that I struggled with when I first got into this was that very thing, my ego. I mean, I was in one of the biggest fraternities in the world, was the military, and then narrow that down into the SEAL teams even more. That is a brotherhood, and I love that brotherhood. I very much miss it, but there's also that bravado. And when a counselor recommended mindfulness and meditation to me, I laughed in his face. I was like, what are you talking about this hippy dippy woo woo stuff for? I've got some serious mental issues going on. I need to address them. And he sold it to me as performance, and that kind of appealed to my ego. But once I got past the performance and I allowed myself to put that ego down, then I allowed myself to access some of the greater benefits of mindfulness and meditation. Yes, there were performance enhancement, but there's also the compassion that we've spoken about on the show, the connection at a much deeper level with other people around me, brothers and sisters alike. And I tell you, it is game changing when you can put that armor down, take off that mask, drop your shield, start practicing with some consistency, and see the growth that happens in your mind, your body, your soul, and your heart. It's incredible. So I love what it is you're doing, brother.
Yeah. I mean, we have, we mentioned in the beginning, there's 2/3 of young men, aged 18 to 23 are, they feel misunderstood or unknown, so where do you think, from your experience working with this population, where do you think that's coming from? Or what are you hearing with these younger men with this misunderstood? You mentioned shame earlier in your own experience of oh my God. So can you just kind of elaborate a little bit more as far as, what the struggles of young men are having right now and this being misunderstood? I'd love to learn about it.
Yeah. So I'm going to start just with the big picture. And this is a conversation that I think is getting bigger and bigger every day. Richard Reeves just published a kind of groundbreaking book around his research with boys and men. And, from my experience and perspective, we're at such an interesting time to be a man, because for, at least here, once again, in our cultural context in the United States and in the West, men have played a particular role for thousands of years, often a role of protector, of leader. And I mean, we needed protectors for many, many, many years, and in every single community, because every community was at danger from nature, but also from other communities, right? And so, we have this tradition of and ideas around masculinity, and all the stories we tell about heroes, and our the honor code that they have of being able to step up and fight for what you believe in, and fight to protect the people at home and your property. And unfortunately, at some point, the people at home and the property kind of got overlapped, and so there's definitely challenges with that kind of thinking. And in the last 50 to 100 years, we have seen huge social upheaval, the changing of roles, a very welcome conversation around, how do we expand the roles that women play in society, and understand the different value that they can provide for themselves and each other, and the opportunities that need to be available to everybody, not just, a group with a particular identity. And so we've seen a conversation around renegotiating what a woman's place in society is in the United States over the last 100 years. And the challenge is, we've been talking about this, and feminism has had multiple different stages of suffrage, where women finally had the ability to represent themselves and vote in the early 20th century, and then kind of second wave feminism, where women were taking on more masculine roles, kind of adopting masculine traits so that they could also be power players in companies and have a career and be career driven. And that's continued to evolve. But what we have not been talking about is, okay, if the roles that women play are expanding, so they don't just have to be nurturers and homebodies and perform domestic duties and support the family that way, we haven't been talking about the need for men's role to expand as well, to not just be the provider or the breadwinner or the protector, but to also have an opportunity to nurture, and an opportunity to support their families. And I don't necessarily want to go into the conversation around, well, biologically, it's.
Well, we can get into that.
Yeah.
I think at some point, maybe have you back on the show. We've actually had an episode on that in our testosterone episode quite a while back, but definitely want to have you back on. I hate to cut you short, Colin, but unfortunately I do have to drop because the time goes so fast when you get into talking. And for our audience, unfortunately, I do have to drop a little early today, so this episode is going to be a little bit shorter than our typical episodes. But that said, Colin, I'm going to have you back, man. I think there's a lot to unpack here, man. Definitely. A lot more. We have a whole list of questions that we didn't even touch on, but you've been a fantastic guest. One of the things that Will and I want our guests to do is speak, not for us to talk the whole time. And you've done a fantastic job explaining what Manscending is, where it came from, and the drive for it. What's motivating you to do what it is you do. So it's fantastic. That said, like we said at the beginning of the show, we like to bookend this with a practice front and back. And I'm going to give you a second here in a second to lead us through that practice. But for our listeners, ways for them to find you. What's the best way for them to find you, and then find out more about Manscending, and then take it away with that practice, brother?
Thank you. You can follow Manscending on Instagram, provide lots of tools and meditations to help be more mindful, and head to our website, manscending.work, because like I said, it is a practice. It requires effort.
Love it.
And then for our centering, since we've only got a couple seconds, I split it into centering the body, centering the breath, and centering the brain. So Excellent. Sit upright, find the middle of your pelvis, stack your hips above your shoulders above your hips, and your ears above your shoulders. Once your body is centered, feel your feet on the floor. Take a full deep inhalation in through the nose, and a full easy exhalation out through the mouth. And just hold empty and wait until you feel that impulse to breathe in. We are a society of overbreathers. We waste a lot of energy just breathing too much. And when you feel that impulse, slowly and evenly breathe in and out through the nose. The ideal rate of respiration to enhance your oxygen levels is 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out. It feels really slow. And once you've done that, we center the brain just by bringing our attention to our body. You can do a body scan, or just notice a particular sensation like your feet on the floor or the position of your arms, and ask yourself, what is present? Where can I relax? And what intention do I want to bring to the next a few minutes, a few hours, and the rest of my day. And then let that go. Step into the rest of your day. Keep part of your attention inward, part of your attention outward, so we can recognize and self-regulate when we have experiences to bring us back to center. Because from the center, you can move in any direction. It is a place of power. Thanks for having me. That's the abridged version.
I'm sure. And again, apologies for
great
the
practice.
abridged episode, but thank you so much for everything that you've shared today with us. Really appreciate it. Again, what it is you're doing. And for our audience, thanks for joining us today. We, again, appreciate you. We sincerely appreciate you tuning in, whether it's live or whether it's in the recording afterwards on YouTube or elsewhere. And if you got something out of this episode, please share it with your family, your friends, whoever else you think got something or could get something out of this. Please give us a review, subscribe on podcast and YouTube, and all that other happy stuff. Until next time.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Colin. We'll see you again, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope you walk away with some new tools and insights to guide you on your life journey. New episodes are being published every week, so please join us again for some meaningful discussion. For more information, please check out mentalkingmindfulness.com.